Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to our Itty Bitty Webinar. Those of you that are early enough to come in. Hi. Anyway, so this is really kind of a fun dynamic that kind of started popping up about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that we started really looking at. So I'm excited. We're going to be talking about detectives and mysteries. Okay. When we were looking at mysteries, we're saying, okay, there's several types of different mysteries. Okay, there's the detective mystery, and then there is the murder mystery that's more just a one-off. It's self-contained. It's things like primal fear and uh, even usual suspects, but that's got some other dynamics in it. Versus they're both types of melodrama. We definitely know black and white. In the satire, though, end of it with primal fear, we have some hidden identities going on as well. And so that's you kind of veer from the melodrama, even though it is a very black and white story. We veer from the melodrama part of it because we're unaware. And usually the melodramas, we're pretty aware of who is good and who is bad. We know the white hats, we know the black hats, we know the Darth Vader versus the Luke. So let's start with, I'm split. Like, okay, should we start with the dangerous ones or the fun ones? I know they're all over the place, of course. I went ahead and I drew this. Let's start with the detective one, because these are really short. So let's get right to the point. When we have, can you guys see that pretty well? Okay. When we have the actual detective stories, what happens is the murderer commits a murder. They are obviously norm breaking because they're a murderer. So we have a solid line here. They are also the noise and chaos, the murderer right there. So we've got that dynamic right there with the murderer. But then when we go to the, I'm trying to figure out which color to stick with. When we go to the actual story, we look at the system. Usually the system is our system, but it's our police systems. So we have the police up here, or the sheriff, or the authority, the law, and obviously the murderer is breaking that law. But in comes our detective, and our detective is also our avenue into the story. So this is why we identify with them so strongly, is because we're seeing it through their eyes, which also keeps the murderer hidden. Frequently, our detective is our safe character as well. They keep us safe. They can get into the mind of a murderer to figure out the mystery, but they know the law. Occasionally, though, one of the variants of this is the detective is just the ally. They're not safe, but they are an ally to the law. This is like in Monk, he's more of an ally, less of a safe character. And then aligned with those, I don't want to do red for this because I don't want you to think they're part of the murderer story. Aligned with this, we've got the we've got two options for their assistance. Aligned with the police and the law, if particularly if the detective is our safe character, we have two options for allies to the system, or allies to this is the assistant to the detective. And you'll see two kind of varieties. You get either the very sexy bombshell kind of female assistant. Sometimes she'll dress, but she won't dress sexy, and she's not stupid. She's very smart. So we have the smart female, smart, or we've got this a male that is sometimes a little bit quirky. Male quirky. And these are just some of the dynamics that you're seeing in some of these detective, particularly the series, where this is going on. This is a self-contained, all-in-one story where the detective wins, the murder goes down, so the murderer loses, detective wins, the police win, we win, and we get kind of this comical drama mystery. But if you add in the story of this is an ongoing series, like the Sherlock Holmes one that was set in New York, or I was remembering another one. I'm trying to remember The Mentalist. It's been a while since I watched The Mentalist. When we get this kind of dynamic going on within the individual, I said that wrong. Okay. Little OCD, spelled it wrong. There we go. Detective. I did want to make a note that the murder is their own noise and chaos. So this is the typical detective story right here. And and it is just going off of a typical, you will have a little bit of variation. But we see these really interesting, we don't usually see this in a story code. Usually we've got detective, 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 or, primary actor, central viewpoint character, norm breaker are all the same person. And then usually the noise and chaos, particularly more melodrama stuff, the noise and chaos, you would have murder up here, murder, murder. But in the detective series, we get a slightly different dynamic. And always, there's never, we always, in these stories, we always get an ending, because that's what they're all about, is about the detective solving the mystery. And they always do solve it. We don't always get, you can get some variants where you would say, this is not a detective story. It doesn't follow the traditional, and you cut it off and you don't give people a hero ending. But whenever it's a traditional detective story, we get the viewpoint from the detective, but the detective still has a lot of power. He does pull off the win with the support, and there's always a lot of support for him. He's always got these assistants. Even in the new Will Trent, he's got all these assistants. He's pretty brilliant himself, and these guys are quirky too. There's something off about them mentally. Monk is, the Sherlock Holmes is, these detectives are fun characters to go through the story, and of course they have their overarching story, which their backstory is the story for the entire series. We finally solved the mystery of Monk's wife, and the stuff he's going through, or Longmire, we finally solved the mystery of his wife. So you see how these detectives are outside of the norm, and they're aligned with or safe character when compared to the law. Although I love Longmire, because he's still the law, but there's some systems up above him. I want to show you guys the other kind of mystery, which is the dark one. And these are things like primal fear. This is when you've got, so you have the lawyer right here. And he is our viewpoint. But then you have this unknown murderer. And this poor boy is being accused of it. And he's very terrified looking, and just humble, and just like I don't know, he just discovered the murder in the scene. And there's a lot of noise and chaos going on. It is caused by the murderer, and the murderer does start it. And we have, we've got our lawyer is the safe character for this poor kid. And we've got up here the law. The lawyer's on the side of the law as well. But then all of a sudden, he gets the kid off. He wins the trial. and you're free to go. Everything's great. Are you sure? I can't, nope, you can never be brought up to this, can never be brought up again. You will never be put on trial for this again. And the kid, you see this visible personality change. And it is revealed. The murderer wins, anti-hero, because the boy, we see some of the, his description of things as we're going along, but we don't realize he is the murderer. And he has been faking it all along. And he gets away with it. He wins. He wins here. The law totally loses. We are severely battered. And that's one of those satires where if in a satire you start your own story, there's a duality of character. There's somebody, there's something hidden, unrevealed about that person. They create a lot of noise and chaos, and satires always win, either rogue hero or anti-hero. The system either gets battered or loses, and we always get battered in a satire. And those dark ones, Primal Fear, Usual Suspects, even though it's slightly different, with a lot of death up and down, you can do a lot of little tiny changes in these. But this is, if you're familiar with some of the stories we've done on the cone, these are definitely very different than some of the normal stories we look at. We do not have our traditional primary actor, central viewpoint character, primary norm breaker, hero, protagonist dynamic. And these, and it's just kind of funny how it just kind of splits the cone. You've got this dark side of the cone, very heavily loaded with the murderer.
So, Amy, I have a question.
Yeah.
So, this just reminds me of, say, we call these overlays. Like, it's a pattern that you can overlay on top of other kinds of kinds and types of stories. So, romance is an overlay. The modern story is an overlay. Have we found any, say, this sort of truncated half and half cone? Have we found that in a comedy? Have we found that in a?
I don't know that we have, because
Okay.
it in a comedy, this person would never have enough power to. I would like to look at him more. I have not seen him, but one of the things that you can do, you can have a romance in here.
Sure.
Well, usually in the detective one, but it's a little it's not common, or is part of that backstory of the detective, like in Longmire and in even Will Trent, Monk. There's always those slight bit of possibility of a romance. Even what's the pineapple one? I always forget. The two detectives. The one pretends that he's a clairvoyant, that he's
Psych.
what was it?
Psych.
Psych, yes. So
Yeah.
psych, and you'll see, yeah, male assistant up here. That's this one right here.
Mhm.
The a slightly kind of a male, a quirky assistant. You've got the one he's quite a norm breaker on his own, and you would say that, yeah, in his own story he's a norm breaker, pretending that he's clairvoyant. Monk's very norm breaking in his own story. The murderer starts everything. So in this overarching story of these series, yes, you get the traditional stories going on, but then each episode has its mystery. So in that part, it's the overarching story is a normal drama,
Mhm.
or tragedy.
So another question I have is that this seems like this would be the same pattern for your basic crime show as well, because you've got a crime that has happened,
The
right?
NPC.
Yeah, one thing that we watched recently is White Collar. It's a series, and
Yeah.
you've got a FBI informant working with the FBI guy. The FBI guy would fill in all the detective roles,
Yes. Yeah.
and the informant, and we're not quite sure if he's good or bad or reformed or not, but he's kind of, I don't know, it's like the crime's there, but he also, in the bigger story, he's the norm breaker. He's the one that's the brilliant,
Yeah.
he was based off of Abernathy, is that his name, in Catch Me If You Can. But anyway, I don't know. That's interesting.
And even the stories like Devil's Advocate. You get Night of the Living Dead. You get Primal Fear. You get that. Those are the horror and on the satire side of mystery, and on the drama side of mystery, you get the detective ones. So there's a bit of a split there where you get that duality, the hidden identity of your murderer, or I mean the hidden identity of your norm breaker, that we're siding with that norm breaker. We don't think anything about them being very odd. Secret window. All of a sudden, those are the gotcha mysteries, where the detective ones are more, our hero won. And we get that traditional, like, yes, traditional hero at the end of every episode.
So Ben had a really good question online yesterday about what if you've got, and I'm even thinking, well, I don't know. He was saying, what if the person who's solving the crime is a big norm breaker and maybe shouldn't be there, like they're meddling where they're not supposed to be. I'm thinking of like some kids that are trying to solve the crime or something. Or I even started thinking about Nancy Drew and whatever, but I think they probably follow this exact same.
Yes, because they, in their story, if you look at it as their story is the overarching, because you'll find that those are series. If you've got, because they're just very fun, like Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys and the Three Investigators, what those detectives, what their stories are. And yes, in their own story, they're norm breaking, but when each murder or event happens, they're just trying to figure it out. And we have to kind of keep in this one, we have to keep the mystery hidden until the final reveal. And that final reveal in the drama end of it is we get a traditional hero here. And that's all of those: Nancy Drew, Hardy Boys, all of those. Monk, in Longmire, in Psych, in Sherlock, the Mentalist, all of those. You'll notice they follow that same thing.
So
this now, though, the true crime series that you get, and you get just the whole they do interviews of the survivors, all that kind of stuff. I'm wondering if some of those reality shows that explore a true crime follow the same dynamic. I'm gonna have to watch some and see if they structure them really, like that. Not the ones, of course, that don't get solved. Those ones, yeah, modern realistic. We're thrown into our own meaning making, and we're like, what? We don't know this. The solution. What happened? Who knows? Nobody knows. It's still a mystery, and it drives us absolutely insane. And that's the modern story. So actual true detective or mystery stories do get solved, and it just depends on, detective wins, yay, cheer, traditional drama, and with some melodramatic tendencies, and murderer, or if the murderer wins, oof, we're taken down. It is absolutely terrible. We find out that we were duped. It was a gotcha, and it's an anti-hero that gets away with it all. Anyway, it's just really a fun dynamic to be able to, what's actually fun is that we can say, hey, we see something that's totally different from what we traditionally look at when we say the four kinds, drama, comedy, satire, tragedy. We're like, wait a minute, this is kind of a mix. What really happens? And that once again proves this is not a formula. This is just a structure that once you actually put the characters on their roles for the functions that they actually do, you're not forcing them into it. You're saying, well, it's supposed to be a norm breaker, it's supposed to be a hero. No, this is what's so different about the story code, is you place the characters on the cone based by the functions they actually perform. And when you see the resulting dynamic, you're like, oh my goodness, that fits how I now feel emotionally. This is me at the end of the story. I'm going, oh, thank heavens. And I'm glad that murder was revealed. Or, oh, crap. I just got taken for a ride. Look at okay, so like if you start your own story, no matter who you are, you're either going to pay the price or you're going it's a tragedy or a satire. Tragedy, you lose because you started your own story. You got taken down. You should not have done that. Or in the case of an anti-hero where they've hidden who their identity is, and you're like, they got away, and we look at our system and say, how did they get away with that? What can we change with that? What needs to be changed so that doesn't happen again? Those satirists want us to notice those flaws in our society and pay attention, because you are vulnerable if you don't if you're not aware.